Welcome to another edition of In the Minute. And you know what? We can't do this in a minute because we have a lot to say. First of all, we have to bring in the person that made a lot of stuff happen. We had a chance to talk with the new general manager, Don. Again. You see, I said your name and broke it down. Donna, you know what? Everyone's talking about this new general manager, and you know, me and you have had our back and forth because I felt that Mayhew did a pretty good job, and you said, well, they didn't win. But then if you look at other teams, all those number one and number two draft choices that Washington made are playing now on other teams, and now we got a new general manager in there. And what I've heard about Adam Peters is everywhere you hear he's successful.
Hey, Tony, you know good and well this Washington football Commanders team did not do well with the player personnel. And I'm not throwing anything at Martin Mayhew because, as we said before, his hands was tied behind his back. He wasn't making the calls for this team. It was Ron Rivera that was controlling this. So I'm not saying that Martin Mayhew, did not do a good job, but this team as a whole, as far as player personnel, did not do a good job overall, Tony, because if they had, we would be in the playoffs and we would be talking about how great this Commanders team. And as Peter said, this was one thing that Adam Peters said is when they asked the question is, what do you think about this roster? And he said, there's a lot of work to be done. That tells you a lot there, Tony. And then he said also that he's going to do it right. They're going to do it right this time. And this Commanders team, this new ownership, did it right. They hired the GM. The GM is basically looking at the head coach, and the head coach will go as far as to get his personnel. So when you look at how they had done it in the past, Tony, they were a bust. They did it the backwards way with the old management and all that. And Adam Peters come with a lot of credentials, Tony, winning credentials too, Tony, because he won in San Francisco, where he just came from as assistant GM, and then also when he was out in Denver. So he has the credentials, Tony, as far as a winning formula. And when you listen to his interview about the process of what they're going to look at in the draft and how they're going to do the draft, he's saying all the right things, Tony. And I think, like I said, that he's won in other areas. And we've been able to have these retread coaches and personnel that has not done it right. Now, hopefully they'll keep Martin Mayhew on because him and Adam Peters have a relationship with each other. Tony, he's won. Listen at his resume, Tony. With 3 Super Bowl victories, 6 consecutive championships, and 13 division titles. That's Adam Peters, Tony. So if you're wondering if he can get the job done, yes, he can. And Tony, when you go back and look at the beginning of the process of what Josh Allen did in putting together that committee, which, it was a committee with Bob Myers that, used to be with the Golden State Warriors, won championships with him, the Magic Johnsons, and some of the other guys that he bought in. You can really say, Tony, that this new regime, they're not letting any dust settle or grass settle under their feet, Tony. So you have to say that what you saw so far, you gotta like it as far as this championship team in Washington, as far as the ownership, as far as the GM. You've got to basically say they hit it out of the ballpark. Wouldn't you say so?
I'd say right now, but at the same time, I think we're a little bit ahead of ourselves because we still have to really digest if the trade that they made, the 2 key players to this defense that they got rid of, if that was the right thing to do. I know you got enough draft choices and you can rebuild and you can do a lot of things, but those 2 players may not can be replaced. And so we look at that. They put themselves in the hole. But one thing that I have seen, Donna, they are not like the last organizations that drafted who they like. They're going, I think, draft who they need. And that's what's important about this team. We're always raving about, okay, our defensive back, this one was the number one. They're playing like they're free agents, okay? Let's keep it real. We're talking about the defensive line. You got 2 superstars in the middle. Hey, when they don't get that near that quarterback, they're not superstars. Until they get back to that range, I'm going to have to say everybody needs to be honest in this thing. And that's why I look at Mayhew. I think he did a pretty good job of getting players, getting the right players. But I just think, as you said in one of our broadcasts earlier, that they did not allow him to do what he could do. So we had to take that in consideration. But I'm pretty sure they may not keep him because Adam Peters has been around. But he's also going to see that Mayhew's been around. He was in Detroit. He was a winner. He's been here. He's been a winner. He's been. I tell you, he got a good resume as well as Eric Bieniemy. When you're talking, how many Super Bowls did he have? He got a couple, do we not? And he's won a lot of these divisional games. So I'm going to fight for him as long as I can. But at the same time, Donna, we can't keep broadcasting and pretending that this team has done the job ever since Snyder took over. And see, when he came in with his idea, he wouldn't even let the older players work out and different things like that. And it still seems as though, even though everything had transpired, he still won. Look how much money he made on this. So what I'm looking at, this new regime, they would want to start over. They don't want any of the things that was left here behind. But at the same time, look what you have in front of you. And don't get rid of somebody that you can use rather than just saying we cleaning house. So that's where I'm looking at.
We slide, Tony, about, they brought in the right personnel because they ain't got the quarterback right since who knows when. In 7 or 8 years, Tony, it's been like a revolving door as far as quarterbacks, as far as players. So for you to say that they've gotten the right personnel in here, Tony, no, they ain't in players.
Let's back up on Smith. Smith don't get hurt. If Smith don't get hurt, they probably have been to the playoffs maybe 3 or 4 times in a row. Am I true about? Is that true?
Tony, no, because they ain't had the right quarterback in place because they weren't going nowhere. They weren't, and not only that, Tony, they haven't even rebooted the offensive line that's been bad for forever, Tony. So
I got to go with you on that one, Donna.
Yeah, and was for Peters, Adam Peters. Adam Peters said, when asked the question again, Tony, when you look at this roster, and Coach Rivera said they were so close. Adam Peters, with not even having to assess them to go do a deep dive, he said there is a lot of work to be done. So if there's a lot of work to be done, Tony, they haven't gotten this roster right in a long time, because if so, we wouldn't have seen all of the hiccups. But Tony, the Commanders are in good shape going into the draft. Because if you look at this, if they reboot and everything, they're projected to have one of the most salary cap space. They've got a lot of salary space, Tony, in the league. And they also have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds of April's draft, including the 2nd overall selection. So, Tony, let's talk a little bit about the draft right now and looking at the Commanders and Marty Peters. Adam, I don't know why I want to call him Marty Peters, but Adam Peters said that they asked him, how would you build the draft or build the team or when you look at the draft? And he said that, I'm going to actually let you hear what he said about how they're going to build this team in looking at the draft and free agency, because they have a formula already, Tony. So I know, man, you go backwards and forwards on who they should pick with that number 2 pick. As far as the drafts overall, we know that quarterback is a need. We know that offensive lineman is a need. We know that linebackers are a need also. And the draft is high, is solid on quarterbacks and on offensive linemen. So if you're looking for these 2 areas, this is the draft to look at. Linebackers, not so much so. So they may have to get that through free agency. And then veteran quarterbacks being able to be brought in here. I'm still, Tony, saying that this Commanders team has enough wiggle room that one of these quarterbacks is going to be there. And it's got to be a quarterback that you're going to basically love, Tony, and say this is the quarterback for the future, with which they have not gotten that right yet as far as looking at quarterbacks for the future. And hopefully this group will get it right. But if I'm the guy looking at this and all that, I'm still telling you, no matter what you say, no matter how you twist it, you stir it up in the pot, you make the cake and put the ingredients and whatever, I'm going to trade down my number 2 pick in a way that I can get not only the quarterback, one of these quarterbacks, but my top offensive lineman. But Tony, you got the floor. What are you going to say?
It's just like that old song, somebody left the cake out in the rain.
It was
I don't
you.
know if I could take it. It took so long to bake it, and I never had that recipe again. So you know what? You can say all of that, and you're right. Quarterback is important, but let's look at the other. Well, you said they got 5 picks in the first 3 or 4
In the
rounds.
first 3 rounds, and then they also including the second round pick.
Okay, how many do they have in the first round?
They've got I
Two.
think they got. I'm not for sure, so I don't want to
Okay.
put
Well, let's just look at it. They
out there.
can build with that. If they got 5 picks in the first 3 rounds or whatever, I'm looking on the second half of it being for my offensive lineman. You are 100% right. Offensive linemen are needed here. But you also know you can get some Joe Jacobys and some Russells, and you can get Maydays and different people like that in different rounds. Now, we did get some of them in the first round, but all of them came in different time. George Stocks came back when I played. He came from Dallas. He was a tight end, then he's a offensive tackle. So you look at this. What you got to do is get the right people at the right place. I look at the top of that. If you got I want some game breakers. I want some game changers. I know that we got a number 1 draft choice playing out there as a defensive back, but he's not getting it all done. If I found something, but that number 2 overall pick, I'm a new organization. I'm trying to build myself back in a city that knows about winning. I go out and I get that quarterback to give them that hope. Now, as I said, and I was referring to Smith, the young man that broke his leg that came from San Francisco. I think when we had him in here, we did have our quarterback of the future. Unfortunately, he got what's his name?
Alex Smith, Tony was
Alex.
just
Yeah, when we had him, I felt like we had our quarterback of the future. He tried to come back and did a great job coming back, but ever since he's been gone, it's been shuffled. So we got to look at that position and we got to solidify it and get it ready. And also, as I said, that gets the fans fired up. They were fired up this year because they thought we were maybe 1 or 2 plays away from being a good team. Not plays. But no, they were wrong. You look at what happened. We gutted the team. We never fixed the offensive line. We allowed the quarterback to make, you can't win with a 50-50 quarterback. No matter if he's winning, the games he's won, you look at he's going to lose as many. So you got a veteran sitting on the bench that has shown you that he can play and you don't use him. There's where we start our mistake. As you said, maybe the head coach was, and I try not to mention a lot of names because it's people I'm going to talk about that I don't want to put their names out here in our broadcast. But at the same time, you start with your coaches.
Oh, you don't want to put Ron Rivera's name out there?
No, because I think Ron's a good guy. He's a great player. And I hope he get a chance. So, but some of the names, let's jump around a little bit. Belichick he's hot, isn't he? He's coming back for a second interview in Atlanta. He's been they're talking about possible the Cowboys. And what do you think about that? We need to do, okay, we'll come back to the Commanders. What do you think about that? What do you think Belichick's going?
You know that Bill Belichick was going to be one of the most sought after coaches, even if he wasn't winning over the last few years there in New England, but everybody looks at him as being a winner. Now, was he a winner because he had Tom Brady and that combination went together well? Because when they split it, New England basically went down because they did not have a quarterback after Tom Brady, but Tom Brady went down to Tampa and still won. But Tony, you well know Belichick is one of those guys, but everybody's looking at the new fresh guys, the younger guys, the innovative guys versus the old guys that stuck in the dark ages still. Can they come up and basically run a team now with the old way of thinking? Because I think it needs a little bit of both. So with Belichick, I was glad that Washington didn't interview him and that he's not coming to the Commanders, because I think that he would not move this team forward and he would not be the right fit. Now,
why do you think that, Donna? What is your thought process?
I think his old way of coaching and everything, that he stuck with that. And I think he would have been more successful in New England in the last few years Have he grasp the new way of how offenses is running now, and the way defense is. Everybody is faster now, Tony, and the game has changed a lot from when he first started out. So he did not adapt with the change as far as the NFL, the way teams are. Players and offensive schemes are being ran and not having the right personnel. I think he was left behind because of his way of coaching. That's just my thoughts. Because
and your thoughts go down. And think about this now. If we go back and they make the right pick at that quarterback position in a year where they had a lot of good quarterbacks out there, they thought they had the one, but he's not the one. And that was where the big mistake was really made. I don't think Belichick's coaching, he started to lose players, key players. But at the same time, the quarterback position has been the one that's been unstable, even though they drafted this man high in the first round. So that's why your argument is legitimate when you say if the Commanders do that, they got to make sure they got the right person. But I don't think Belichick is too old to get it out. I think that he can get it done, but he just can't. He can't do it as dominantly as he used to. What he can do right now, if you give him a good team, I bet you he could come to this Commander team. And I bet you he could turn it around right away because he's going to look at what hurt him this year. Quarterback play, offensive line play. Now, aren't they they played that's part, they're intertwined. So therefore, that we got that same problem here. Quarterback play, offensive line play. He know what the problem is now, and you got to give it to him. Okay, yes, he won with Tom Brady, but he may not have won championship, but he won without Tom Brady as well. He's always been known as a defense.
Did he win a Super Bowl after Tom Brady?
He did not win a Super Bowl. He won games.
Hey, games is one thing, Tony, but the big ticket is what you want. I just want to know, did he win Super Bowls after Tom Brady? And I still think.
Oh, well, you act like it was 10 years ago. It wasn't number 10 minutes ago they got rid of Tom Brady.
No, look, Tony, it was a long time ago they got rid of Tom Brady, and he was successful for where he went. But I still think that Belichick's coaching styles I think he needs new innovative people in there with him. His defense wasn't even the same, Tony, after Tom Brady. And he's a defensive-minded guy. So I still think that I don't want him. I want some of the other. Let's throw out some of the names for the Commanders, Tony, because the Commanders are looking, and we're talking about the Bill Belichick's that he wasn't even on the list for the Commanders.
Is that your list or is that an official list?
This is the short official list. You can call it that. Whatever way you want to spin it,
Tony. Well, come on. I'm going to call it out like I see it.
Was not on this list. And I want to hear from the fans also. What is your take as far as who this Commanders team should pick in the draft, whether it should be a quarterback? Because, Tony, we want to hear from the fans because these people follow us. And if you're not right, Tony, they calling you out. Not me, because I'm normally right. So
you know that because the only reason you know that because they'd have called you out already.
Hey, they don't call me out. So I want to hear from the fans. We want your comments as far as who do you think that the Commanders should take in the draft? Should it be a quarterback, one of these quarterbacks as far as Caleb Williams from USC, North Carolina Drake May, and LSU Daniel? So we want to know, or should it be offensive linemen? Because they've got some great offensive linemen. How would you fans build this team? And also, as far as the coaches, Tony, we want to hear from the fans also as far as some of these names I'm throwing out. Would you all have wanted a Bill Belichick to come in here and be the coach for the Commanders? Do you think he's past his time? Do you think he would have helped this team? Or do you want the short list that the Commanders are having right now? So right now, Tony, the Commanders are looking at the choice, two of them, their defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator is Ben Johnson. He is hot, Tony. He's probably on their main list as far as right there at the top. And then you got the line.
He's been hot for the last couple of years, Donnie. And,
their
offense really came on quicker than their defense. And if you look at it, they have had a prolific offense. But aren't some of these guys – didn't their head coach or one of them come from the Patriots or was involved with the Patriots at one time?
Well, you got Dan Campbell. Rick Walker talked about Campbell as far as his styles and everything. Tony, he's going for fourth down on everything. It don't matter if he's
in the 20-yard
line or so. He's going for that. But you like his mentality as far as how he built this Lions team. You got a solid head coach, and then you got hot offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. So like you said, these are the two people. When you look at their coaching staff, Tony, it reminds you of Joe Gibbs when he was putting together his coaching staff with, everybody, Patty Bone, and then Joe Bugle. So when you look at that winning formula, it worked for them. Same thing in Detroit. Campbell, then the offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, and then their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, who's had that team playing pretty well. But Ben Johnson is the hot one right there. But then, Tony, you got the Rams, Raheem Morris, that they're looking at. You know, he was here in Washington at one time as a position coach. And also the Ravens. You know, when I'm calling these names out, Tony, these are people that's in the playoffs or were in the playoffs or still in the playoffs. As far as the Ravens, Coach Anthony Weaver, I think he's already been interviewed for the Commanders. And then the Ravens defensive coordinator, as far as Mike McDonald, that's one of the probably the second people on their list that they're looking at bringing in here. And then the Cowboys, Dan Quinn, but I wouldn't take him because he reminds me a little bit of a Belichick. And I just think that the younger minds. But, Tony, if you're looking at coaches, would you look at an offensive-minded guy or defensive-minded guy, or does it matter for the head coach? And calling out some of those names, who do you like?
Well, you know what? If you go back and look at Reeves, yes, he was there in Washington. He also was here in Atlanta, and I saw him when I was a uniform inspector for 28 years. I got a chance to see all these guys. The same thing with the defensive coordinator. He was head coach here, Dallas' defensive coordinator, and I know that he did not do a good job the other day. I don't know if it was because people exposed him, and we can digress on that. I told you, anytime somebody running Dallas, but we are always so busy trying to say, okay, we can run outside them. Nobody else can. And I'm not saying when I say we, I'm talking about the league. They all want to show they can run outside. So that was his mistake. You start looking at Reeves. I remember how he worked with his players here. He's gone out to L.A. and built that defense up. I think he was an interim.
Are you talking about Morris, Raheem Morris?
Excuse me. Yeah. And I think he was interim at one time in Tampa, was he not? And so he's got a resume. And I think what you need to do is get an individual like that if you're going to get a defensive minded. But they have to go back and look at their last coach was defensive minded. It didn't help a lot. So I think this time they'll be looking for an offensive-minded head coach and a coordinator that's off the chain. Now, maybe Morris would be good to come back here for coordinator if they could get him moved. But, you know, and let him be assistant head coach or something. I would do something like that. In other words, I think these guys are smart enough that they're going to build for the future. And that's the only way you can build up a team. We know, we joke and we say anything but down, and we know football. We know sports. And one thing you got to look at, you got to build that organization. It's just like anything else. If the foundation isn't good, it's going to crack sooner or later. And that's what they got to do. They got to start, and they did. And the way they're doing it, I'm not going to say it's wrong. But at the same time, I do go back to that argument that I think if you look at every team that's improved, teams that were 1 and 16 and 2 and 14 or whatever a couple of years ago, they got coaches, but they also got quarterbacks. Look at the young quarterbacks now. Let's look at Houston. Let's take a look at in Green Bay. Let's just take a look around. The young quarterbacks are coming. So this is our time for the Commanders to get one of these young players right now and develop them. Keep one of the two that they can keep. I'm not going to say which one I would keep. I think you know. But I will keep one of the guys from this year, and then I will get me another quarterback that I can develop and grow with, that I know I got an opportunity. If he's a number 2 pick, it's very seldom you're going to make a mistake with that on the quarterback. You got your 3 up there. Well, you got to decide which one that will be a compliment to your team. That's what they have to do out of the 3, because if you separate them, it's still going to be rookies coming in. It's still going to be people around the league know how to stop them. So you get the one that fits your program better, and I think they'll do all right.
Well, Tony, you know what? You hit on as far as going to segue into the playoffs, because we beat the Commanders over the head enough. But the playoffs is hot. I mean, the first few rounds, blowouts and so forth. But you talked about Houston with their young quarterback that really played well this year, and DeMarco Ryans, what he's done to turn that Houston team around. Because Tony, they had some rough patches in there, looking like that they weren't even going to get into the playoffs, and also Green Bay too with their young quarterback. So when you look at the playoffs this coming week, let's start with the NFC divisional playoffs, Tony. You've got, the Eagles falter, and we knew that was going to happen because they were limping in on one leg into the playoffs. But the Bucks, Todd Bowles, and what he's done with that team and getting them in there, and their win that they had. But they going up against the Lions, Tony, the team that we've been talking about that really turned things around this year. Played well. I was at the Lions game last weekend, Tony, and that atmosphere was unbelievable up there in Detroit. It was probably that way, Tony, because they hadn't been there in the forever. And
Dang,
so
Johnny, you got big money. Why can't I go to some of these games? Every time I look up you at the game, and you're not learning no more when you go to the game than to get rid of the enemy.
I'm the reporter that's doing my job. The fans want to know firsthand what's going on. So I'm where the action is, Tony, trying to get the latest and the greatest story to share with the fans. But again, Tony, that atmosphere, I've been to Super Bowls with the Commanders, playoffs with other teams. And let me tell you, that atmosphere up in Detroit was the best that I've ever seen. The people wouldn't sit down, Tony, the whole game. That was by far one of the best games played between the Rams and the Lions. But Tony, you got the Bucks going to Detroit. How do you see that one playing out? I don't see how the Lions lose this game.
Well, let's go back to the Philadelphia. We're going to find something out. You never see a team go down like that unless they got some inner quarrels that we do not know about. That team just went sour. I mean, you can't go 10-1 and then you go 1-6 or something like that. That doesn't work.
Last 6 games, Tony.
I mean, and we know that, and we indicated, which nobody else did, and we did that on this show in the minute, as well as Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus. We saw that the quarterback was hurt, but it was something else going on, and I guess we'll find out sooner or later. Something broke that team up. I don't know if it was because maybe some players didn't feel like they were getting opportunity, and I'm not going to go there, but we'd have seen people arguing on the sideline a couple of games. You've seen people, and the one thing that the announcer said the other day that really caught my fancy was they didn't act like they cared. They didn't act like they were fired up, and this was a playoff game. I think that they expected to go back to the way they were at the beginning of the season, but it didn't work. Now, going to what you said, Tampa Bay really fooled me. I didn't think they did it. Yeah, they've changed their whole defense, and the one thing about it, and that's what really caught my eye in the game the other day, Todd Bowles is a defensive genius. And he had a lot of good people on there when they went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago or whatever it was. And at the same time, he's turned that whole team around. And the defense now is on the emphasis on that defense is playing well, giving them a chance for their quarterback, who has been around a lot, but he is an experienced quarterback, to win. The only reason I picked the Lions for the simple reason that they got a really good offense. They're going to have a problem. But their defense have come on a little bit. I don't know how good Tampa Bay's offense is going to be 2 games in a row. The quarterback had over 300 yards last week, but at the same time, can he do that? Can he duplicate that? So when I look at that game with the home field advantage, and as you said, that remind you of the Washington Redskins when nobody would sit down. So they got that going for them. So I would have to pick the Lions in that one. But really, that's a toss-up. And you heard me tell you, that's a toss-up.
It ain't no toss-up.
Yes, it's a toss-up. The
Detroit Lions got a running game, Tony. And
what about the defense, Donna?
Tony,
the defense didn't start showing up to the last 4 games.
It ain't no fans. It's no toss-up. The Lions are going to win that game. So I'm tossing Tony up. But Tony, okay, let's move on. The Packers, who just destroyed Dallas in that game. I'm talking, this is the thing that I laugh about Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn all season long, Tony, played man-to-man defense. He had them in zone the whole game. Didn't make no adjustments during the halftime. And McCarthy is going to be back in Dallas. They already said that, Jerry Jones. But he didn't make any adjustments to his defense in that zone, and he had all of them. Michael Parsons looked like he was totally lost out there, along with the defense in general. And we know Dallas, Tony, Dak never shows up for big games when it counts and everything. No running game, no nothing. So they were in disarray. But Green Bay, Tony, were you surprised about just how dominant they were in that game? Because their game plan was spot on. But can their game plan be spot on to give San Francisco a run for their money?
I don't think so. But they did do a good job, and they found out Dallas's weaknesses, which that's another thing we keep saying. We told them time and time again on the show that if you run right at Dallas, they have a problem, and that's what they did. They made them hit them in the mouth, pull down their skirts, and made them look like the girls they were. I'm not being a fascist either. I'm just saying that
put out their pom poms.
Right. And they would palm and cheering. They looked like they were confused. And you said Dan Quinn. That's the wrong time to change up your defense. Exactly. Whatever got you there, that's what you get. And you're right. It didn't look like Parsons and them. They felt good. In other games, you see them. When I saw that Parsons is 6'4" and weighed 230 or 40 pounds, I know he's the greatest pass rusher maybe in the game right now, but I know I got to run at him every time I get a chance, and that's what they did. And see, Dan Quinn went to a zone, and they knew how to hit those zones. That was just right for them. You have to think about it. When you got a young quarterback, to hit the one-on-ones is special. To hit the zones, you're throwing into a zone, and you expect it, and you may even throw before the player get there. They had been playing one-on-one and controlling that, speaking of Dallas. But then they're going to go to zone. They left those zones wide open, and Green Bay just hit them. But the thing that was real impressive was running the ball right at Dallas. I don't think that's going to happen with San Francisco because San Francisco can run the ball. San Francisco got a good defense. San Francisco got a Washington player that'll probably have 3 sacks. And I think that they are one of the
Bo's are going to have them 3 sacks.
The only thing that can hurt San Francisco is sometimes they're soft. You say, what do you mean? They get hurt. And we're looking at the same thing with the Ravens, which I know we'll talk about them later. But you got to factor that in for every team. And then when it becomes, the first time it's an incident. The second time is a coincidence. But the third time it's a pattern. And when you see a team that they always, when they get to the big one, somebody's hurt, nobody to fill in. I mean, when Trey went out a few weeks ago, that whole offensive line changed. So I look at them as being the favorite. But when we in this playoffs, Don, I got a feeling that the last 2 standing may be 2 rookie quarterbacks.
Hey, Tony, you may not be wrong because McCaffrey told me when Washington played them, he was wounded. He had a calf injury, and he said, and there were some more injuries. And, 2 weeks, they haven't played. They set out their starters basically for that last regular season game. Want to talk to you about how would that affect possibly San Francisco, but they're getting well. So they had 2 weeks to get well, McCaffrey and that whole group and everything. But does it matter the fact that, Green Bay is in a groove right now, Tony? But San Francisco has been 2 weeks out.
I don't think Green Bay's defense can hold up to San Francisco. That's going to be the big thing. Even if they're hurt, they may not can hold up to them. Their offense is kind of intriguing because nobody knows this quarterback really. And remember, we've always said the quarterback's first year in, he could be good, but they give him an offseason to study in. So now they're going to look at where his weaknesses are, but they're not going to be in time enough for this game. So now it's coming down to talent and injuries. I don't think Green Bay, they had a great job, but Dallas was really just a facade anyway. They looked good on the front, but it wasn't nothing but the front. So, if you take a look at it, that was a good game, but that wasn't one of the better teams. And they just lucked in. If the Eagles don't go south, Dallas is playing in the wild card game anyway. So as I look at it, no, Green Bay cannot knock off San Francisco unless it's a major injury. And when you say McCaffrey, he could be the most versatile player in the league, but he's also one of the ones that stays hurt the most.
Well, all I know is that these 2 quarterbacks, all I know that these 2 head coaches,
Do you know or you just guessing?
No, all I know
Tell
is
the fans, if you don't know, this come on clean, Donna. This
hey,
is
Tony,
one-on-one now. Get your boxing gloves out.
what I'm saying is, all I know that these two coaches were here in Washington, Cal Shanahan and Matt LaFleur. Does that tell you something right there? But as we move on, I'm not going to hold on to that because of the fact that they could have been here in Washington still.
That's a great point, though, Donna.
They've been in the playoffs, so in the, year after year, it tells you something right there. Those young, innovative coaches and everything are in the playoffs, and whereas Washington sitting at home on the couch watching. But
looking for a coach.
Let's roll over to the AFC playoffs.
But wait, let me ask you a question before you go to them, Donna. Do you think that Washington may go the way of everyone, the root of everyone else, and look for maybe a 35, 34-year-old coach? Maybe look for some young one coming up that they can develop with the quarterback. Do you think they may do that? Everyone's doing it now, and it seems to be working pretty good. The old coaches we're seeing a changing of the guard. Do you think Washington will do that, Donna, or do you think they'll try to get a midway coach?
Oh, no, the names I called out to you are in that age group. Ben Johnson is 36 years old. So the coaches that I told you about are those young coaches that we're talking about in their 30s, early 40s and everything. So I think they're looking for that, the freshness. And the thing about it is keeping up with this league now. You look at the coaches in there beyond Andy Reeves and some of those coaches right there. The Texans coach is a young one too, as I told you right there in DeMarco Ryans, and so we're talking about them right now. The Texans, Tony, they're playing against the Ravens, and the Texans showed off against Cleveland. Cleveland was supposed to be one of the best defenses in the league going into the playoffs, but the way the Texans, they just ran through them like they were an invisible door because they dominated Cleveland and Joe Flacco, they exposed him. But
they sent him back to the couch.
The Ravens is a different story. Do the Texans, Tony, they've got a lot of the key pieces also. And the Ravens, to me, just like San Francisco, rested their players for the last two weeks and everything, that final regular season game. But when you look at the Ravens and what they've done this season and the way Lamar Jackson has played, he's got the receivers finally that he's needed. And this defense of the Ravens is back to their championship one when they won the Super Bowl that year. Can the Texans create some hiccups for the Ravens?
They can, but Donna, they're a young team. You look at the Ravens; they were
That's
the most
scary, Tony. Young teams don't have no pressure on them.
Right, they don't care. You're right. They don't know how to be afraid. But if you do look at the Ravens, they had more players injured during the course of this year than most teams. And you look at the big thing, their number one running back got hurt. They're starting to pick up their running game a little better because you want that to happen because you don't want your quarterback to have to be leading rusher. So they got that going for them. You look at their defense, they've been 1 or 2 the whole year. That's going to be the key. And that's what I think is going to be the downfall, that they got a young defense that's good. And then they got an offense that's great. You look at it, but I'm going to go with one thing. You hate to say this, and we speak about people, and we as people, I'm talking about you fans, us former players, us reporters like Donna. We look at guys and we say, boy, he just wasted. But they got a guy Beckham on there. I think you can really see his influence working with the young receivers. And you can see that he's not the same cocky guy that was in New York and different places, but he has experience and he always got an opportunity to come with a big game. I look at he could be the difference here because the one thing they don't want to do is run their quarterback too much and get him hurt early. All they got to do is take the Philadelphia film down and you see what happens. So when I look at this team, I look at them just as we look at the San Francisco. There's a team that if they can stay healthy, they'll be in the Super Bowl. But we don't know that. They had more injuries this year than most teams. So we don't know that. So that's a toss-up. But I go with them. They're going to beat Houston just because of experience.
Yeah, Tony, and the thing that you mentioned key was Beckham. in the early part of the season, him and Lamar Jackson weren't on the same page. And now, through the course of the season, they've gotten on the same page. So you can see that connection working really well right now.
For the big plays, Donna, for the big plays too.
Yes. And so that, like I said, struggled in the beginning because, he was just getting there, and now he's grasped that, and they've got Flowers, the other speedy rookie receivers that hitting all strides too, Tony. So that's going to be a good game, but you just never know playoffs games, how they play off. It's
Exactly.
who makes the last mistakes and who's the hot hand in that game also. But Tony, in our final one, it's the Kansas City Chiefs, who have struggled all year long. They haven't been the same since Eric Bieniemy hadn't been there. They might want Eric Bieniemy back. And if this is the year for Eric Bieniemy to get a head coaching job, if he doesn't get it with the Commanders, it's so many coaching jobs open, vacancies right now, Tony, 7 right now. But the Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo, looked like they were dead in the water at one time, Tony. They fired their offensive coordinator, got a new one, and it seems like they're hitting strides right now. But this Buffalo team is playing well. Can this be the year that they upset the Kansas City Chiefs? Or still, will Kansas City end up dominating as they always do? Weather is no factor.
Stick a fork in Kansas City because they're well done. Okay, I'm
not so sure of that, Tony.
Yeah, stick a fork. I'm going to tell you what, Buffalo. If they can keep their quarterback from trying to be Superman all the time, just every now and then run like that. If they can get their running back, they had some more running back injuries, but if they can get that solid running back, they got a quarterback to make plays. The one thing that I was really concerned with them, which is still have a question mark, is their defense. Their defense is okay, but they give up too much stuff. And then the quarterback has to come back and win the game. But right now, I just feel like Kansas City, not because the big part, as you said, Bieniemy is not there anymore. And we see his influence. It's just like you said with New England. The coach was still there, but the player was gone. Opposite way here. The coach is gone. Now you can see a difference. Mahorn's always going to give you a lot, and Kelsey, he'll catch a few balls and everything. The running game is not the way it used to be. And I don't know if that's because Bieniemy left or they do not have the personnel. They got a guy they've been running the last couple of weeks that's shown he can do stuff. But at the same time, when you look at that overall team, hey, man, they just been pulling it out accidentally and not on purpose. And you got to look at them, and we got to be truthful. I don't see them. Hey, Taylor Swift gets more information put on the TV
For
than
real.
And every time he catch, she catch. And I don't know.
Every time he drops, she drops.
Right.
He's had more.
And see, that is not the team's fault that the television network has taken her and made her just equally as important as the team playing. But if you look at this team and you get Mahorn had to make too many plays now that he didn't. He made them before because he wanted to. He's making them now because he has to. He got young receivers. Yeah. Running back is starting to come along. Defense have not been coordinated. They got the big guy back in there, and he's having a great year. But you can see some weaknesses on those end positions. You got to get more pressure out there. So when I look at them with this big quarterback, then the main factor, let's digress and go back to Baltimore. Up in the Washington, D.C. area, they dropped 6 inches of snow yesterday. Okay?
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say. We know what Buffalo can do. Now, I know they played in Kansas City up there in the ice and the cool, and it was all that, but it wasn't Buffalo cold. And see, Buffalo cold comes with a lot of snow. So you know what? I give them the edge just because of that. Stick a fork in your KC. It's all over.
You know what, fans?
Get out the line.
Always wrong.
Party's over.
Tony is always wrong because ain't no forks being stuck in Kansas City because Kelsey, like you said, Tony, Kelsey had more drops this year than forever. But Andy Reeves always finds a way to pull out the lucky rabbit foot, the 4-leaf clover.
You just brought up, and I kept my mouth shut. But I'm seeing him doing more trick plays and stuff. Did you see some of those plays? No, come on, man.
But Tony, Buffalo, Josh Allen, can he win the big game? Because he seems not to be able to.
He wants to be Superman all the time. and they can't afford for him to get hurt. But he wants to make the throw where 1-on-3, he think he can get the ball in there. They got to stop that. Running the ball. If they need 12 yards, he gonna get it by himself. He'll get it. No, your team has to do that.
Hey, they do have a running game this year, Tony. That the
Yeah,
Buffalo
better
Bills
than it
do
was.
have
Better
that.
than it was. But at the same time, I'm still not sold on the defense down there. It comes down to it in the cold weather. The defense is very important. That's how Kansas City really got over in that cold weather. They held Miami down long enough that when Miami went in there at halftime and got warm, they didn't want to come back out and play.
Well, that won't be the case for these two teams because they used to playing in the cold. But Tony, ain't no forks going to be stuck in us because we got to go. I want to hear from the fans as far as who do you all pick this coming weekend between the Bucks and the Lions, the Packers at the 49ers, the Texans at the Ravens, and the Chiefs at the Bills. We want you to put that in the comment. But Tony, as you said, we got to go.
Yeah, and we got one more show, fans, and we want you to get into us and tell us what you want to see next year for our 40th year on
The Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus, because we will still be here for the podcast.
Yes, we'll be here we're going to be here longer than y'all. And so that's why no use in saying goodbye. We'll say in the minute.
In the minute.